How's it going here, and welcome to my camera comparison between the Vivo X90 Pro Plus and iPhone 14 Pro. Now, most of you probably know that the iPhone 14 Pro has the same cameras as the Pro Max, but I just want to call that out before we get started. And so on paper, this really shouldn't be a contest. The Vivo is going to have the more advanced camera hardware with this large 1-inch sensor and just larger sensors overall, including periscope zoom lenses and all that. So from a camera hardware perspective, Vivo is going to win hands down, but as you all know, it really comes down to software image processing in these phones. And so from a pure photo and video quality perspective, can Apple's image processing take down Vivo's image processing with its V2 chipset? We're going to find out in this video. We're starting out with indoor video because with the iPhone, it's normally said that it is the king of smartphone video. It's going to take the best video on any smartphone, and its main criticism would be how it handles video indoors. And so right now I've got the Dolby Vision turned on the Vivo and HDR video turned on the iPhone. And so this is where most people think the iPhone fails. It's going to create too much of a warm image quality with HDR turned on indoors. So I'm going to come back with a video with the Dolby video turned off and HDR turned off, and we can see what the image quality looks like in this same setting. All right, so we're back in the exact same setting, still at 4K 30 frames per second, this time with Dolby Vision on the Vivo turned off and HDR video on the iPhone turned off. So let me know if you're seeing any kind of image quality differences. Does the iPhone look better in this particular indoor setting with HDR video turned off or on? And similar with the Vivo, do you prefer Dolby Vision on or off? So I'm gonna come back with some cinematic video so you can see what that looks like here in this same setting indoors. All right, so we're back with cinematic video on both phones in the same indoor setting here. So let me know what you think about this mode here. You should be seeing an artificial background blur. And on the Vivo, it's actually adjustable, so you can control the amount of background blur if you want on the Vivo. On the iPhone, it's just predetermined as much blur as the iPhone thinks it should be. So let me know what you think about this particular mode here in this particular setting. And like I always do, I'm going to show you a bunch of photos and videos in both good and low light conditions, so you can decide for yourself which of these two camera systems might be best for your smartphone camera needs. So let's go ahead and check out all the photos and videos and let me know what you think. Evan, we're testing the rear cameras on the Vivo X90 Pro Plus and the iPhone 14 Pro. As you can see, they both are actively recording from the rear-facing cameras. And this is with the ultra-wide-angle lens to start out on each at 4K 30 frames per second. So I'm just going to pan around to give you a feel for side-by-side how these ultra-wide-angle cameras compare in this particular setting. We actually got a break from the storm, so we actually have some nice blue skies and some greens for now. And so it's a good comparison here with all the different colors. And so we'll move into the main lens, which is a one tap on the iPhone, but more of a pinch to zoom or a tap to zoom on the Vivo. So a little bit more painful here. And you'll see the next tap it'll all clear up because it'll hit the main lens right there. So picture cleared up, it's on the main lens on both of these phones here. So we'll just pan around again side by side so you can see how this looks here with the main cameras on each. And then we'll move over here to the right, so we'll test zoom out on that cell tower. So of course on the iPhone we have a 3x telephoto lens right there, and on the Vivo it's a 3.5x telephoto. So you'll see the picture clear up once I hit that 3.5 telephoto lens and a couple more taps here. And there we go. So 3.5 telephoto on the Vivo, 3x telephoto on the iPhone, and then on the iPhone we can go to a max 9x digital zoom, and on the Vivo it is a 10x max digital zoom. So let's back these out and let's get back to 1x main camera here on the Vivo right there. And let's test autofocus on the post with the Vivo first. So really snappy autofocus for how large the sensor really is. I'm pretty impressed. And let's go with the iPhone. Pretty fast autofocus from the iPhone as well with its new 48 megapixel sensor. And so let's go ahead and test stabilization by walking down the stairs so you can see what stabilization looks like at 4K. Side by side with both phones. Let's just jog to try to stress out that stabilization. So there you go, outdoor video test on the rear cameras on the X90 Pro Plus and iPhone 14 Pro. Alright, so here's a quick test of the cinematic mode on the rear cameras on the X90 Pro Plus and iPhone 14 Pro. So the iPhone can shoot 4K video with cinematic mode on, and the Vivo is limited to Full HD 1080p, but the Vivo is configurable, so you can adjust the amount of background blur that you're seeing on the Vivo, while the iPhone is just automatic. And so I'm outdoors in some pretty even light, so there's really no harsh light on me, so this should be doing the best possible image quality because of that. And so if you just pan around here, there's really no harsh light today, so you might not see a lot of contrast difference and exposure difference, but I'm just going to pan around so you can see how this looks like in a bit of changing light here, as well as with a bit of motion, how that background blur holds up. And so we'll also start walking so you can test more stabilization and see what this looks like with a bit of movement. So let me know what you think of the cinematic mode here on both of these rear cameras. Alright, so this is just a quick test of the advanced stabilization modes on each of these phones. So you should be keeping the picture a lot more steady. I'll be jogging, so pay attention to the horizon and let's see how steady each of these cameras keep the picture. So there you go, just a quick test of the advanced stabilization modes on these rear cameras.
Let's go.
So this will be a front-facing video test of the X90 Pro Plus and iPhone 14 Pro. As you can see, they both are actively recording from the front-facing cameras. And this is going to be at their max resolutions, which is 4K on the iPhone and 1080p Full HD on the Vivo. And so this is going to be at 30 frames per second just to test because the Vivo is only stabilized at 30 frames. I'll show you a 60 frames per second clip a little bit later. But I'm outdoors and some pretty even light. There's no real harsh light today. And so this should be looking the best possible footage you can see here because there's no harsh light to really blow up the exposure here. So I'll just pan around so you can see how this does in a bit of a changing light. So as you can see, the sun would normally be back out there, but it's a bit overcast today. So you're not going to see too much of a difference in the contrast and exposure here because of that. But I'll pan around so you can see how it looks this way, and we'll just start walking to test the stabilization. So you see more of a crop on the Vivo to achieve that stabilization. But let me know what you think of the front-facing video quality here on both phones. Alright, so we're back with the front-facing cameras, this time at 60 frames per second. So you're going to see a wider field of view on the Vivo because it's not cropped in because there is no stabilization at 60 frames per second. The iPhone does have stabilization. And so I'm in my same testing spots, you can see, compared to the 30 frames per second footage. So again, just like the previous footage, I'll pan around so you can see what this looks like with a bit of motion, as well as some changing light here. And then we'll start walking just to test the stabilization here at 60 frames. So it should be looking a lot more shaky on the Vivo than it is on the iPhone. But let me know what you think of these front-facing cameras at 60 frames per second here. Kevin, so we're back with the front cameras, this time with cinematic mode on, so you should be seeing more of this artificial background blur here. And on the Vivo, that is adjustable, and on the iPhone, it's just automatic. And again, the Vivo should be limited to 1080p, and the iPhone can do 4K in cinematic mode. And so I'm in the same spot that I did the previous front-facing camera, so you can see what the quality looks like here in the same situation. I'll pan around so you can see what it looks like here and how this background blur holds up with a bit of motion and a bit of changing light. And we'll go all the way back around this way, and we'll start walking so you can see how this background blur effect holds up with some movement here. So let me know what you think of the front-facing cameras and cinematic mode. So this is a low light video test of the rear cameras on the X90 Pro Plus and iPhone 14 Pro. This is the ultra wide angle cameras to start out on each at 4K 30 frames per second. So I'm just panning around to give a feel for how these ultra wide angle cameras compare here in this particular night setting. And we can go ahead and move into the main cameras. And so on the Vivo, it's more of a pinch to zoom or using the zoom slider on the camera app. Unfortunately, no one tap to get to your actual focal length you want. You saw it brighten up once it hit the main lens there, and one tap to the main lens on the iPhone. So here is the main cameras side by side, same setting here, and how they're performing. Both kind of flaring that light out, maybe the Vivo a bit more here, but let's go ahead and pan around this way, and we'll just start walking to test not only stabilization, but we'll also walk over to a bit darker area. So you saw how they performed with a good amount of light over there, and as you round over this corner, it's going to get a lot darker, so you'll see how they perform with a lot less light. And like I always say, you're going to probably see some micro jitters here in the stabilization, which is common in low light. And as you're around this corner, it's a lot darker, but both phones are trying to brighten up the scene so you can actually see more. And because of that, it's going to introduce some noise. Obviously on the Vivo, you can use Pro mode and tone back the ISO if you want to get it a little bit darker, more real to life. But if we pan up this way, there are clouds in the sky, so it is gray. But you're going to see that noise in the picture because of the camera trying to brighten everything up. And if you pan around this way, more of a mixed lighting situation, a lot darker down this alleyway, but we do have some lights coming off the building, but again, still much brighter than what I'm seeing with my own eyes. So that's how these rear cameras perform here in 4K on the X90 Pro Plus and iPhone 14 Pro. All right, so here's the tail end of the last scene in Pro mode on the Vivo, and I've got auto exposure and autofocus lock on the iPhone. I've turned down the exposure, so it's gonna look a lot darker, and this is what it kind of looks more like to my actual eyes, so it's not as bright, because you don't have that auto exposure and the ISO auto cranked up. And so this is what the scene looks like, more true to life. You can use Pro mode on the Vivo, like I said, and use the auto exposure lock on the iPhone to turn down the exposure and get it looking more true to life like this. So if you want night to look like night, that's how you can do it in this particular setting with those types of controls on each phone.
Downtown, I got that heat, let's go.
Alright, so here's a low-light video test of the front-facing cameras on the X90 Pro Plus and iPhone 14 Pro. This is at their highest resolutions, which is 1080p Full HD on the Vivo and 4K on the iPhone. This is at 30 frames per second because at night 60 frames per second is a bit too dark. And so I'm starting in my usual testing spot with some pretty good light around me, so you can see how these front-facing cameras can do in a fairly optimal light at night here. And so we'll go ahead and start walking so we can test stabilization and give you a view of what that looks like side by side from these front cameras. And we'll also walk over to a much darker area so you can see how these perform in less light. I also have a water fountain here to my right so we can test out the microphones and how they sound against the background noise there. And the Vivo has this voice enhancement feature that you can actively toggle on and off while recording, so I'll turn it on right now. And so that should be blocking out more of that background noise, but I find that it actually degrades the quality of the audio. It's going to sound a little more garbled, more digital because of that, but let me know what you think of that voice enhancement feature here on the Vivo. If you pan around here, we can see how these front-facing cameras do with that really bright street light behind me. And so they're both going to flare them up, but it's a really bright street light, so that's going to be expected. But overall, not too bad for front-facing cameras. And if we pan around this way, we can see how these cameras perform in this darker area here side by side. And as always, we're going to try to brighten things up so you can see a little bit better, so you can see a little bit more artifacting and noise because of that. And the iPhone's going to look a little bit warmer in color tone like it normally does. Hey, so I just want to close out this video with my thoughts and opinions about how each of these cameras perform. But first, I apologize. I forgot to turn on the stabilization on the Vivo's front-facing camera and that low-light footage that you just saw. But hopefully you've seen the front-facing stabilization in some previous clips. I'm in my office at a bit of a different kind of lighting situation now. This is during the day. You can see some of the sunlight seeping in from the outdoor there through the windows. So this should be producing a different kind of effect in how the cameras are handling this kind of lighting situation. But I just want to kind of give you my thoughts and opinions about how each of these cameras perform, because I've been using them for a while. I'm very comfortable in how they perform and the results that they produce because I've done several camera comparisons with each. And so in the beginning of the video, I mentioned that hardware doesn't always beat good software image processing. But in the case of the Vivo, you have great camera hardware, especially with its main 1-inch Sony IMX989 sensor, combined with some great software image processing and their own custom V2 chipset. And it's producing some great results that I'm really enjoying. And I really hope that more smartphone manufacturers can actually bring this kind of camera hardware to phones that we can actually purchase here in the United States. Because for people that use the pro features of other phones like the iPhone and their ProRAW, ProRes features, imagine what they could do with even better camera hardware. And so for me personally, I think the best overall camera system, or the better camera system overall here between the two, is going to be the Vivo. But it's not perfect, and it's not going to be the best in every category. For example, the shortcomings on the Vivo are its front-facing camera, especially in video. It doesn't do 4K video, and it's not stabilized at 60 frames per second, and I don't really particularly like the colors as much from the front-facing camera. But from the rear camera system, it is very good. It's producing great results, especially for photos. I'm liking it. I do like the Zeiss natural color option. The Pro mode has been great, and surprisingly, I thought the iPhone would definitely be better in just point and shoot video, but at least in the footage that I shot for this camera comparison, after looking at the footage on my computer, I do actually prefer the Vivo's video as well, which really shocked me because in previous Vivo phones, the point and shoot video has not been the best, but it's even better because in Pro mode, it can shoot in log and you can color grade and color correct to your heart's content to really get it to how you want it to be. But really, that's the thing that surprised me. I really thought iPhone would win even in video, but to me, the Vivo's footage, at least for this comparison, again, I actually preferred the Vivo there. But that's my quick thoughts on each of these two phones and which ones I personally preferred and why. Drop a comment down below and let me know what you thought and which one you preferred. If you have any of these phones or even maybe both of them, let me know which one you prefer to shoot with and why, and we can continue our conversation down there. And as always, thanks for watching.